next week because my parents are coming down to, I don't know, spend time. Let's get started.
Won't you listen to reason? Will you open your eyes? It's a wonder what you'll find with an open mind. You may be surprised. Yeah, gotta get away from this illusion for the sake of the world. This delusion.
September 9th, 2012. There's like a little, it's right there, but I can't see it because there's a camera in my way. I'm Matt Dillahunty. This is Tracy Harris.
Hello.
Welcome. This is a live public access television program out of Austin, Texas. We'll have the number up for you shortly so you can call in. Although it looks like all the lines are already full.
Surprise.
We're going to do what we can to get through as many calls as we can today. Some quick notes about the phone because we've gotten some feedback about the problems with talking over. There's very little we can do about the equipment in the public access studio. There are solutions in the work that may change that in the near future. We're going to try to do a better job of holding. If you call in, you'll be able to hear better. First of all, if you can do it on a landline instead of a cell phone, it works a little better because cell phones are notoriously bad about full duplex in conjunction with the phone systems that are up here that aren't necessarily tuned correctly. So a lot of it has to do with people can't hear each other. We can hear everything, but they can't always hear. So I'm going to try and do a better job of doing the whole thing. And also if we can encourage callers to kind of get out a question or a point and go for a back and forth instead of a life story or a sermon, that'd be pretty helpful too.
As the sign says.
Yeah, this is the...
Can you see it?
That says, and your point is.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's visible on screen.
I think it is.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Did you enjoy the trip to Denver?
It was phenomenal. Yeah, I had a really good time. All my cranky notes about conventions and I had a really fun time.
Cool.
I bought some cool stuff from the vendors and I met some really cool people and got to meet people in person who I'd met online or else through Beth on Godless Bitches. And so it was really great to see people in person, I have to admit.
Yeah, we had a really good time too. And in addition, there was a picnic on Monday where we went out and we hiked up. I'd like to say it's a mountain because I felt like I had hiked up a mountain by the time I got to the top of it. But it was actually in the foothills outside of Denver. It's about 6,800 feet or so. And we had a really good time. And the surprising thing, lots of, they're the Rocky Mountains. Lots of rose quartz and stuff just lying around, and
That's
of course
cool.
it's like, oh, we could make so much cool stuff out of all this, but
That
it's
is
a
cool.
park, so you can't take it.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know how the state got possession of all those rocks.
It's great.
There's some secret conspiracy for the state to control the rocks.
I don't think I ever laughed so hard as Herb Silverman's talk.
Herb was
that
absolutely
man
hilarious.
Is hysterical and had me rolling.
So anyway, we had a really good time. We're going to go ahead and get started on calls because we have only an hour to get this stuff knocked out. And I'm hoping that my list has refreshed correctly. Frank in Raleigh, is that you?
This is I.
How are you?
I'm doing well, and just saying hi, thank you, but I'll get to it quickly. The question I have is, I'm an atheist, former Catholic, but one thing I have noticed, especially down here in the South, is that when I was growing up Catholic, if we didn't like the priest, we just shut up and ignore them and kind of not do anything, not do anything with the church. But out here, like my family members, well, they'll just change and they'll go to a different church. And what I'm trying to get at is how I see this now in politics in the U.S. And I'm just wondering, like I said, I don't understand it. Why do you change churches so freely? Not you, per se, but the Protestants change churches so freely. And how I see that being, like this, in a lot of separatist movements, shall we say, in the United States, or, some guys with tea bags on their heads doing that type of stuff.
Yeah, so a couple quick points on this. One is that I think you see this more often in Protestant denominations than you do in Catholic.
Well, that's what he's saying. I was going to ask, when you say they go to another church, do they go to a different denomination, or are they going to a different church within the same denominations?
Sometimes they'll go back and forth to Free Will Baptist or some evangelical Pentecostal, or just some run-of-the-mill SBC.
Yeah, there's not a great deal of different. I mean, for example, my mom and dad got married in a Methodist church, even though one of them was Baptist and one of them was nominally Catholic at the time. I have a very dear friend of mine who went to Southern Baptist churches with me and was actually a youth minister, who is now a Catholic. I had to laugh a little bit when you mentioned that Catholics, if they didn't like what was going on, they'd just ignore it, because I think that's what we see pretty much across the board with Catholics, because the positions that
Except nuns.
Well, no, the nuns are engaged in a backlash against the Pope right now too, and there's a number of Catholics who don't agree with the Church's position on any number of things, and yet they're still Catholics, and it's why I like
that's what you're saying.
The Freedom from Religion Foundations. You can leave that church. You can drop yourself off the rolls and find a church that's better suited to you. Yeah, I kind of like it. I like the fact that we're seeing perhaps more of this. It means that people might actually be thinking and saying, what this doesn't agree with what I think should be, and so I'm going to seek out what fits my own personal preferences.
It is an interesting question, though. Like, at what point do you abandon ship versus try to change something internally? I mean, I don't really know the answer to that, but I mean, I think what Matt is saying is, with the Catholic Church, it seems that, what is that phrase from the Declaration that is, people are disposed to suffer? It seems like people are, disposed to suffer quite a bit of evil, and still kind of stick with it.
Well, like my mom and my sister, I love them dearly, and I refer to them, lovingly as cafeteria Catholics.
Sure.
And they kind of, I don't want to say they're mad at me, but they're not. They understand where I'm coming from, because I was a cafeteria Catholic until I quote unquote came out of the atheist closet at work, nonetheless, which was an entertaining experience, especially down here. I had many people go, "Frank, how can you be atheist? You're such a nice guy."
Amazing how that works.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know you're not supposed to discuss religion or politics at work, but we do.
Okay.
And I'm happy to say that not many of them have too bad of an opinion anymore of atheists. So anything I can do to help.
Awesome.
Good.
Well, thanks a lot for calling, Frank.
Thank you.
Bye. It's one of those things, when I was growing up, if we'd move, my dad changed jobs, he worked for the airlines, and we'd end up moving around. And every time we'd move, it was, let's find a new church. And the process for that, because we were Southern Baptists, was we would visit a bunch of Baptist churches, and whichever preacher my parents liked best, that's where we ended up going to church, which is this entirely transparent self-selection process of, we think the preacher's the one that they wouldn't say best represents what we think, but he's the one that's right with God, and they know this because they're right with God.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a bit of fun. We've got Eric in Mesa, Arizona. How are you?
I'm doing well, Matt. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm alive.
Yeah.
That's good enough sometimes.
Yeah, that's very good. And Tracy?
Hello.
I'm glad to know that you're on the show today, because I have been waiting to be able to call back and speak with both you and Matt, because I spoke with you a number of months ago regarding some proofs about God. I don't know if you guys happen to remember our conversation.
Was this about nothing?
Exactly.
Who could forget?
What's that?
Who could forget?
I think I've tried to.
I still did not hear you.
Who could forget?
Oh, yes, exactly. And so the reason that I was calling back, obviously, because Matt, you certainly recall probably that you did end up hanging up on me, and I wanted to get back with you guys and hopefully be able to have a chance to ask you a question when you were both on the line. And
Sure.
what I thought was interesting about our discussion is that afterwards, when I went to the internet and read the comments, what was so surprising is that there were so many comments that were talking about this massive victory and how Matt would build a casket and Tracy would put the last nail in it.
I don't recall.
And,
Was it the blog?
and what I was wondering is the point that I had made in opening up the proofs for God was that something cannot come from nothing. And then, Matt, you had said that I was assuming that you were taking a position that you were not taking.
Right.
And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to call back and read just a couple sentences from a book that you are both probably familiar with. It's called Why I Became an Atheist by John Loftus. I assume you both have read that.
I haven't read it, no, but
Yeah,
go ahead.
I have it.
Okay.
I haven't read all of it, but I have it.
Yeah, what do you think about the book, just real quickly, Matt? Do you think it's a good book?
I haven't read all of it.
Okay.
I've met John several times. I think John makes a lot of good points. I don't know because I haven't read all of it. I can't comment. So
Absolutely. Well, here's one point that he makes that just takes just a couple sentences, and I was wondering if you agree with him or disagree with him. And it's in the chapter that begins, it's chapter 5, and it says, Does God exist? And he writes, when it comes to why something, anything, exists, our choices can be reduced to these. 1, something, anything, has always existed. Or 2, something, anything, popped into existence out of absolutely nothing. Either choice seems extremely unlikely or possibly absurd. Now, he says that these are the only 2 choices. And I was curious if both you and Tracy would agree or disagree with him first.
That something has always existed or something came from, well, I don't think it's possible for, the problem I had last time is that the statement that suggesting something comes from nothing is a nonsensical thing. I can't even process it because it makes no sense. And that's
Okay.
what we were trying to get at
Tracy.
before.
Okay, and I would like to comment on that because here's what I think is interesting. So many of the people raved when you made that comment that it's a nonsensical statement, but what I would like for your listeners to know is this is a comment that is made over and over and over again in the atheistic community by those who would get up and make these claims. So the claim is not, it's not like Eric, the Christian, stood up and said, here is this position and here's the other position, and this was something new that I had introduced. This is actually something that you will read over and over again as far back as, you've got people defending and then arguing against the existence of God.
I've actually only heard the idea that something comes from nothing because you excluded the scientific definition of nothing and you defined nothing as non-existence or non-being, was my understanding. Is that correct?
I did.
So
and
total non-being.
If you go to the internet and punch in a definition for nothing, again, you will see this is a common definition.
This is
nothing.
fine.
It's
No,
not something that
yeah,
I make up.
this is totally
That's not-
fine,
she's
Eric.
not objecting to that.
What I'm asking you then is, can non-being be?
Well, if again, and this is one of those situations where if non-being could be, then it would not be non-being.
So there
But
must
my point
always
is
only
rather
ever
than
be
getting
being.
rather than to go ahead and take a question like can non-being be, what I'm saying to you is that a significant part of the atheistic community and the scientific community uses these terms, and they have to ask the question.
They don't
can
define
something come
them.
from
They
nothing?
don't define nothing like you defined it. You used a definition of non-being that is not the physics definition of non-being. I mean, you used, I'm sorry, nothing. When you said exclude the Lawrence Krauss definition. You said that. That was you saying, I will not accept the scientific definition of nothing. I'm calling it utter non-being. My problem with that is you cannot make a statement about what non-being does because it's not. How can you... talk about the attributes of something that is not.
Okay, so again, I understand exactly what you're saying. And what I am saying to you is that this is a statement that is made by the atheist community.
You keep saying that. You keep saying that, but when you called in last time, you specifically excluded the Lawrence Krauss definition. You said, do not go to the physics definition. I'm using a proprietary definition of non-being. I know creationists often say, atheists say something comes from nothing, but I don't know any that actually define nothing as you did, which was non-being or non-existence. And my question is, can non-being be? Is it your belief that non-being can be, or do you think non-being cannot be?
Well, certainly non-being cannot be.
Okay, wait, put the brakes on for a minute, Eric. Wait a second. If non-being cannot be, then there is never a state of non-being. Am I correct?
Okay, again, this is what I would ask you. I would ask you, in light of what John Loftus wrote, instead of turning it like this isn't...
I can't speak for John Loftus. I didn't write it.
Yeah, not only can we not speak for John Loftus, but I would argue that granted I haven't seen the passage, but first of all, I think I agree with what you read, because I'd be interested to know what the other options were, because those two seem to be mutually exclusive options. But I'm not convinced that John Loftus means the same thing by nothing that you mean in the definition that you're using. And I realize the definition is not Eric's. We're talking about two different usages of a term. Okay. And you're excluding a usage that might include what Loftus is saying, while simultaneously trying to criticize Loftus's position based on the definition or the usage that you prefer.
Right, but I'm trying to stick with the definition that Eric has put forward of non-being or non-existence. If that cannot be, then there can only ever be existence. I don't know what other options there would be.
I guess what I'm saying, Tracy, is if you go to the internet and you look up the definition of what is
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm saying I'm going with the definition you're offering.
Okay.
And according to me...
If you go with the definition that I'm offering, then let me ask you this. In light of what John Loftus has written, and where he says that something has either always existed or something came from nothing, could you just tell me which one of those positions, if either, that you take? And if you don't take either one of those, I'm just curious if we define what position you take.
And I'll tell you, if we define nothing as you defined it, then it's an impossibility for nothing to exist. So there could never, ever be nothing. There would always have to be something, because the way you've defined it implies that there is always existence, in which case I don't know why we'd even need a creator.
Well, now, in the way that I've defined it, when you say that there is always existence, you're absolutely right, and that's exactly what I believe, that existence is always, existence by necessity must have always been.
And there cannot be non-being, and so existence has always been, and so there's no need for a creator, because existence, according to what you're saying, is eternal.
Now, I think you did make some claims here that I agree with, that existence has always been, but that does not, by following that up, by stating that there does not need to be a creator, that's a claim that would have to be proved, and I believe that there's other facts.
If there's never, if non-existence cannot exist, then existence is always, in which case there is no creation, there's no point of creation, existence always exists. According to the logic of non-being being nothing, it cannot exist, and so there is always existence, and so now you need to explain how there needs to be a creator if existence always exists.
So are you willing to go ahead and take the position then that you feel that existence has always existed?
I'm saying it's a question. I'm willing to say that
what do you think the answer to that question is, Tracy?
I don't know, and I don't even claim to have a belief on it. But I'm simply saying that if I take the position that nothing means non-being, then there's no need for a creator, because being has always been. It would have to be.
I disagree with that, and I believe that there's evidence that can go ahead and show that that is a faulty position, but it sounds like you would not be opposed to the idea of existence always being. Is that true?
I'm saying that you either have to be saying that non-being at some point was, in which case it wasn't, which is completely nuts.
I'm happy to say that I accept the possibility that something has always been.
Okay, great. Then let me go ahead and ask this question. Do you guys agree then that the consensus of the scientific community is that the universe has not always existed, that there was a time that it had a beginning.
In this form, are you talking about, right? Like the form that we currently understand it, but not matter or energy or whatever, but we're just saying simply the form of the universe as we know it currently.
Yeah, it's one of those problems with
Right?
the word universe. It used to mean one thing and now it means something else. It used to mean...
Okay.
But you're talking about the current form of the universe.
I'm talking
Right.
about, yes, I'm talking,
Okay.
well, no, I'm simply talking about the origin of the universe. If you go
In
ahead
its-
and you
in
were to
its-
survey the
yeah,
consensus of the scientific
in the
community,
form
do they
in which
believe
we
that
understand
time,
it.
space, and matter came into existence at a certain point in the past, or that it existed eternally, that it always existed?
We
Which
don't
one
know
would
what
you think that
existed
the
before.
scientific community would state?
I think that there's a question about what existed before, and that we know that things like time, space, and matter, or at least they would say that that would be something that we know existed at a certain point. However, what existed previously, I don't think there's too much statement about. I think there might be some theoretical things. I'm not a physicist, and so I'm not totally sure, but it's my understanding that there's no definitive statement of what existed prior to this existence that we're familiar with.
But moreover, I'm curious because we're spending a lot of time on this on a second call from you, and the question is, why? I mean,
Well,
what?
the reason
no, no,
why, Matt,
let
is
me
because
let me
I
let me
believe-
let me
I
let
will
me
just
let
tell
me
you
let
when
me
you
let
guys
me
are-
let me finish. The reason I'm asking why is because you're calling in to a public access show to talk to two people, neither of which express any expertise in cosmology, physics, science, to have a discussion at perhaps a philosophical level about things that can't lead us to anything. And by can't lead us to anything, I mean that my inability to offer you an answer doesn't add one bit of evidence in favor of your propositions.
Your inability does not, but I think that the points that have been established, the point that Tracy would say, and you said you would not have a problem in saying that something has probably always existed, if we take that in light with other facts that I think you and Tracy would agree with, where you don't truly have to be have a PhD in science, I think that evidence clearly indicates that there's the existence of a God.
Well, I said
And-
I agree something always existed if we stick to your definition of nothing and throw out the physics definition of nothing. Didn't I say that? I mean, didn't I qualify that clearly? I thought I
I'm sorry,
did.
I actually had the phone buzz when you said that, Tracy. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And I'm still curious as to, you keep saying evidence for the existence of God, and yet all I've heard is talk about something and nothing. I haven't heard anything that's evidence
well, he
for the
didn't hear what I
existence
was
of God.
saying, though, and all I was pointing out was that I said that if we use your definition and not the definition offered by physics of nothing, then what you're saying is probably correct. I would have to say that non-being cannot be. I mean, how could it?
Exactly. So, and Matt, going ahead with what you were saying as far as the points that I would make, here's where this would lead us. If the universe is not eternal, and I believe the evidence from Einstein's theory of relativity, the radiation echo, the fact that we have hot spots in the universe, and the fact that the consensus of the scientific community seems to be united on the point that the universe is not an eternal universe, then if
not
it's
static
not,
state.
then what we do to try to figure out what could have caused the universe is we have to go ahead and we have to apply like a forensic science that uses the law of cause and effect. And so if the universe
No.
You can't use,
is
you
not
can't use
eternal,
cause and effect.
No.
You can't use cause and effect because the physics, the rules of physics in this universe would not apply to whatever was before. And what you're quoting is like a law, well, what they would call, I guess, loosely a natural law of cause and effect. And also we have particles that don't seem to adhere to cause and effect.
And there's actually a lot more to it than that, and that is this, that we're playing kind of fast and loose with definitions, where I would be much happier saying that the current local state of the universe is causally related, causally traced back to the Big Bang, and before that we can't really say much.
Right.
And you want to use a forensic approach, and a forensic approach necessarily requires additional information, and you have no other universes with which to compare this
right, I mean,
to.
there's already people looking into this
so in light
question
of
and they're
that,
unable to
Tracy,
answer
let me
it.
ask you this then. even though I have no other universes in which to compare it, let me just ask you, if we're going to be reasonable and try to come to some kind of understanding of it, would you not think that a good place to start would be by asking yourself this question? When we look at the effect of the universe, we have to at least try to posit a sufficient cause. And so in attempting to posit a sufficient cause,
I'm not concerned.
If we were,
Eric,
let me
Eric,
just ask you this,
no,
Matt.
no, Eric, no. You're only addressing one prong of causality, and that's sufficiency. And causality includes necessity and sufficiency. And so the fact that you can posit an explanation that is sufficient to explain the universe is completely irrelevant, because you have to demonstrate necessity, not sufficiency. Magic is a sufficient explanation for the universe.
Well, but I guess my point is, if we could sit here and just the three of us figure out what caused the universe, what would be the point of like cosmological physics? And I mean, it seems kind of ridiculous to think that we're just going to sit here and talk about it and figure it out, where the people that are examining the entire body of evidence and devoted their lives to the study of this and who understand physics are saying they don't have an answer. And yet we're going to sit and talk about it, the three of us, without any sort of background or degree in this field, and we're going to just simply come up with an answer with some sort of investigative questioning.
Here's what I think is interesting on an atheist show, Matt and Tracy. Here's what's interesting. I'm going ahead and I'm using as a foundation saying, you know what, let's go ahead and look at what science can say to us. Isn't it something that the atheists who constantly are badgering the fact that the Christian does not want to be reasonable and use science, it's the atheist side that's saying, you know what, we can't do that.
No, you're not appealing to science.
No, that's not what's happening at all. The two of us up here, I'm going to put you on hold again.
He's asking what's happening.
The two of us up here who are advocating for science are pointing out that science has not been able to answer this question, and the person who believes in supernatural stuff, which is outside the realm of science, is saying, hey, I found a sufficient explanation for the universe. Well, big whoop. Sufficiency is not enough. And how dare you pretend like you're the one that is sitting here in scientific rigor postulating the beginnings of the universe? That's just so bizarre.
Really? Am I off silence now, Matt?
You're talking.
For a second.
Okay, you're saying that it's so bizarre, yet what I am doing is I am actually doing what you're saying I'm not doing, and that is using the conclusions, the surest conclusions that science have come to base my position on.
The thing is,
you tell me a law that is stronger in science than the law of cause and effect, Matt, because here's the truth of the matter. Every single law in science is based on the law of cause and effect.
How do you explain virtual particles?
There's no scientific law.
How do you explain virtual particles?
How can you come to a law apart from the cause and effect?
I didn't say it came to a law. We're saying the answer is we don't know.
Correct.
And the other thing is that you're ignoring the fact that causality is necessarily a temporal condition, and there are models that don't include time prior to the Big Bang, and that these laws of our local presentation of the universe may not necessarily apply to other universes or the multiverse, if that's true, and any number of things like that. So while yes, you're appealing to causality, what you're doing is when you reach the point where causality fails, instead of saying, we can't really say much more about this, you're asserting that you can in fact say more because you're using causality and you've come up with a sufficient cause, and as I've explained twice now, sufficient is not sufficient.
Okay, well, again, Matt, this is what I would say. If you're going to try to say that the law of cause and effect, see, personally, I believe that the law of cause and effect clearly demonstrates the existence of God, and I believe that the laws that I'm speaking of, that these are the things that have resulted from the deepest type of scientific examination. And so if we're going to use something, basically it sounds to me like what you're saying is we can't use the law of cause and effect. We have to find some other kind of method. But no matter what method you would find, Matt, unless it's some magic, then if you're going to
mean like God?
Then cause and effect. I'm not using it. You don't even hear me mentioning God, Matt.
Okay.
I haven't even...
Eric, I swear to whatever God you believe in, if you try something that dishonest again about pretending that you're not talking about a God, we're done.
Okay, Matt, I am very clearly talking about God. This is what I said.
Then why did you say...
It sounded to me, and maybe I'm wrong, it sounded to me that you were saying that I was coming across saying God did it. That's not what I'm doing. I am saying that when we look at the laws of cause and effect, and if we're going to attribute a cause that is sufficient for the universe and capable of producing the universe, that the scientific evidence demonstrates that there has to be a transcendent cause because the universe is not eternal, so whatever caused it had to transcend it.
Stop.
It has to be powerful because
Physicists don't know
whatever
physics.
created the universe, do you not agree that whatever created the universe, even if it was a multiverse, that it had to have a sufficient amount of power in order to be able to do that?
Yes.
Okay, so if it was transcendent and powerful, I also believe that we can demonstrate that it had to have intelligence, and I believe the reason that we can demonstrate that is based solely upon all of the scientific evidence that we have, and here's the reason why, Matt. It's called the principle of uniformity. The principle of uniformity clearly in a courtroom holds up time and time again, and what that principle of uniformity shows is that certain effects, similar effects, have similar causes. Well, the only cause that we know that is capable of originating specified complexity, which is what we see in the simplest of living cells, the only cause that we can stand up and say, this is a sufficient and powerful enough cause to create specified complexity, is intelligence.
That is an argument from ignorance. You are saying that because we've only encountered or we've only been able to detect this as a cause, therefore it's probable that this is a cause of something else, something which, by the way, exists outside of the laws of causality. Curious that you ignore that when you get to the transcendence. And once again, you continue to ignore the two prongs of causality, and you just keep going for sufficiency. And sufficiency, as I said, is not enough. Now, I find it strange that you will, in one sentence, say that you're not claiming that God did it, and in yet another sentence, you flatly claim that you believe the evidence points to God. I wish you would just pick something and stick with it and be honest, because the fact of the matter is you're asserting that reason leads to the conclusion that a God created the universe. And not only do the scientists who have studied this and are experts in it and making use of science not come to that conclusion, but the position is, how could you come to that conclusion? Because you can't have enough data to say that this, you can't even determine probability, because you don't know how, you don't have any other universes to compare to, you don't know about what happened before the Big Bang, you don't know if the multiverse theory is true.
Well, and the question is, do all these physicists not understand
Tracy,
science, or does
what
he?
Matt said real quick, if you wouldn't mind, because he said so much.
Go for it.
Let me just say this, Matt. When you say that I'm responding, I'm coming to my conclusions based on ignorance. This is what is so interesting about that. When you say it's based upon ignorance, literally every single example that we have, I can give you an infinite number of examples that show that intelligence is a sufficient cause to originate specified complexity. I can give you an infinite number, but you cannot give me.
I tell you what, Eric, and yes, I put you on hold again because now I'm just getting irritated, and so it's a lot easier if I put you on hold. First of all, I don't accept your assertion of specified complexity. I find that that is weaselly language to smuggle in the very thing that you're trying to prove. Second of all, when you start talking about being able to give me an infinite number, now you've demonstrated that you don't understand physics, but you also don't understand math. And so I thought I'd stop you there. Great. What'd you say?
Okay, you're saying I don't understand math. Matt, what I'm saying is I could literally start giving examples of specified complexity originating as a result of intelligence and literally not stop, because the number of examples
and yet you can, you know what? I can give you every example where I've hit the bullseye. I can give you every example where I've hit the bullseye. Does that mean I've never missed the bullseye? Does that mean nobody else has ever hit the bullseye?
But see, that's a bad example, Matt, because
really?
What I'm saying is every example that is known, we can look at them all. Every example that we have shows that the only cause sufficient to produce specified complexity is intelligence.
Well, first of all, You haven't defined specified complexity, and I've rejected what you seem to be implying by specified complexity, because specified is specified, and you're using that to apply to nature. What is it about a tree that's specified complexity? And by the way, the tree is a natural thing that came from a process of natural production.
You just nailed yourself on that one. What is there about
Good.
the tree that's specified? You got to be kidding me. If
Yeah.
we were to go ahead and decode the DNA in a tree, we literally have a book, Matt.
Yes,
and
we
you don't
do.
have one shred of evidence that shows that a book can originate solely as the result of natural
Oh,
law. And I have
watchmaker.
100 million examples that it can result from intelligent intervention.
100
So once again, you
million.
stay completely empty-handed.
You have a
100 million.
naturally
Where's-
occurring tree, and you're basically just saying that you're going to ignore naturally occurring instances of what you're calling specified complexity. You ignore all the natural
Yeah,
instances.
Tracy.
You say that, well, look at what, this is an example of what you're doing. I have a relative who likes to build ponds on her property. She builds these elaborate, beautiful koi ponds.
Sure.
I can sit here and say no pond occurs without being without someone, intelligence building it, because I've seen her do it, and the only ones that I've seen occur are from intelligence. And so these ones that just form in holes from the rain, obviously there's an intelligence behind that, because I simply reject that they naturally formed.
Okay, again, Tracy, I think that argument completely fails, because first of all, here's the reason why. We know by a ton of examples, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of examples, that natural law is sufficient to be able to produce a pond. But we also know by a huge number
You don't
of
think
examples
trees occur in
that
nature?
The only thing that can produce specified complexity is intelligence. And if
Trees occur in nature all the time. You can plant one and watch it grow.
Hey Tracy, if we back up the audio, and because this is very important, and you listen to what I said, I did not say specified complexity cannot produce specified complexity. I said it is impossible for specified complexity to originate.
So
In other words, from
you
some, hold on, Matt.
so,
let me
no,
finish.
I'm not
Wait,
holding
for
on. It's
what?
my damn show. So you're okay with trees occurring naturally because the complexity was specified in the past somewhere, but you're okay with lakes occurring naturally, and lakes aren't specified complexity? So God doesn't create lakes.
What is the question, Matt?
Does God create lakes?
That's a ridiculous argument.
Okay, bye. I'm tired. 30 some odd minutes
I
with Eric.
I
from
want to
Mesa
say
again.
one
Go
thing
ahead.
that I always say, and I'll never get tired of saying it, and I'll never stop saying it, is when you're going to invoke science and the leaders in the scientific community that you're invoking don't agree with your conclusion, then you're not understanding it correctly. If you're going to put me in a position where I either have to believe that you as a novice understand the scientific field better than every expert in that field understands that field, to me that's kind of a, I'm looking at it like, do I go with an expert explanation or do I go with yours? Currently, I'm not really like devoting myself to either, because this isn't a question that concerns me. But if it did, I don't think I would go to Eric in Mesa, Arizona to ask what we know about the origins of the universe. I think I would go to somebody who actually studies cosmology and ask them. And right now, I don't know that the peer-reviewed journals are pumping out God done it.
You don't get to claim specified complexity. Just assert that that's the case. That you might as well just be asserting that, oh, this is creation. Clearly it had a creator. It's loaded language that smuggles in the idea. And if your argument for specified complexity is a bunch of analogies that are filled with sharpshooter fallacies of, well, every other example we've seen of this, well, guess what? DNA isn't a code. It's not conveying information from one mind to another. It's chemicals that follow physical laws.
Chemistry, yeah.
We just happen to imbue a code upon it so that we can understand it and see what it's doing. But it's chemistry. DNA is no more a code than H2O is a code. We put that in there.
I also like the idea of existence must always exist, and yet there's a required creator.
Yeah.
It's like, no, if existence can't not exist, and I don't, I'm not saying that I think static state is correct, clearly not, but the idea that because we don't have static state, that means that existence didn't exist. It's like, if we're going to go with nothing as being defined as non-being, then being always has been. It would have to be based on that definition. And if being is, then there's no requirement of a creator. Being would simply be, and it would be whatever it is.
Yep. We got about 20 minutes left in the show. I want to get to one real quick and then some more fun afterwards. Mario in Union, how are you?
Good, my two favorite hosts. How you guys doing?
Hello.
Great, and thanks for waiting. And if you're asking what I think you're going to ask, get to it and I'll let you know.
Yeah, I'm going to make this kind of quick. I want to see if you guys could grab another Eric on the line. Have any of you witnessed the fiasco that happened at the Democratic Convention?
Why, yes, as a matter of fact, I have. Would you mind if I answered your question offline?
Yeah, go. Yeah. Sure.
Thanks, Mario. So, while we're not a political organization, and I'm not telling anybody anything about any political parties or ideas, although we can take stances on issues.
Can we talk about a letter that?
I actually posted a letter on the blog to the mayor of Los Angeles, Antonio Villaraigosa, who was the chair at the Democratic National Convention. And some of you may have already seen this video as it made the Daily Show and other stuff, and people are just generally befuddled, and some are laughing. I'm not laughing because I care about democracy. And what ended up happening was the party platform had been voted on, and during the proceedings, somebody called to add an amendment to it. It happens that I happen to disagree with the amendment, but that doesn't matter. I don't care if it was about let's have pancakes for breakfast. What happened is what the problem is. I fully expected the amendment to pass. So they suspended the rules and they called for a voice vote, which requires a 2/3 majority. Voice votes for those people who, when they see this process, think, how bizarre. How could you possibly tell 66%? Voice votes are typically taken when you have propositions that nobody expects to either pass or fail, where it's going to be blatantly obvious. And it should be clear, you know, if I got 100 people in the room and I call out, hey, should this pass? And it's yes, and then there's no. Well, okay, then we're close enough to 2/3 where we can trust somebody's, thumb count of the assessment there. However, on this particular amendment, the yeas and the nays were virtually indistinguishable, and yet Tony, the mayor of Los Angeles, just started to pass it anyway, and then realized, hey, this is going to look kind of strange because I'm reading off the prompter that this passed, but what I heard is that the yeas and nays aren't that distinguishable. Hey, I'll take a second vote. Well, that's a good idea. Let's take a second vote just so that you can be sure whether or not you heard 2/3. And the result of the second vote was that the yeas and the nays were pretty indistinguishable again. And now he looks really confused, and somebody even walks up behind him to say, hey, you got to let them do what they're going to do. And he decides that he's going to take a third vote. And after the third vote, where in the opinion of this chair, the noes were slightly louder, probably because they were pissed off at being disregarded so obviously for the first two votes. When that vote was over, he announced that in the opinion of the chair, a 2/3 majority had voted in favor and the resolution passed. Mr. Villaraigosa, as the mayor of Los Angeles and as the chair during this convention, partisan politics aside, you are an absolute disgrace. You stood there and you lied blatantly to the public. As a representative of a party that's been talking about how much votes count and every vote should count, you shat right on the democratic process, ignored the will of the people, and polluted the party's platform because you're a trained monkey who can't do anything other than read off a teleprompter. You should resign in disgrace, and at a minimum, you should contract the party and ask that the platform be put back to before your stupid ass decided to just say, well, screw it, it's not that important, it's only the party platform, I'm going to read what's on the teleprompter. Jackass. On another note, and I just powered down my thing.
Oh no!
See, Tony, now you made me turn off my tablet, so I don't even know who's on the phone.
Now we're flying blind.
Who knows? Hey, this is line one. Who's on here?
It's Mark.
Mark?
Mark, hey, what you got for
Mark
us?
from the UK.
Hey, Mark.
Hey.
Right, before I go into that, I've got 3 points I'm going to try and slip in. Before I do, I wanted to comment on the first call you had about the cause and effect issue. Tracy almost put a finger on it about things like the virtual particles. For instance, you may have heard of things like the Schrodinger wave equation, which outputs the positions, for instance, of particles as being a probability. There is no known way of determining this probability. This is why Einstein so objected to and used the expression, God does not play dice, because there is no cause and effect. And so So things like the transition of electrons between levels is completely random. The position of electrons around an atom are completely random. There is no cause and effect. The decay of radioactive elements that give off things are completely random. There is no way of determining this is going to happen. So there are cases when there is no cause and there is no link between the cause and effect. So his point on that was ridiculous. And also he talked about sufficient energy. The energy in the universe is actually zero, because if you counter the mass in there and the gravitational effects, the gravity acts as a negative value, and so the net energy in the universe is zero, as in the Lawrence Krauss book states.
Yep.
So basically his point is silly.
Yeah, and in addition, the physicist in the room had been trying to get me to go into all of that, but as I'm not an expert, I normally avoid it. But thanks so much for calling in and offering that information as well.
Right, okay, but my 3 points. Firstly, I think Tracy's got a great smile, and I'm missing her stripy jumper that I've seen on the YouTube videos, so we'll see those back. And I can't remember if I said I was an atheist. My actual reason for ringing in was to sort of provide you with what I think is constructive criticism, because I've got a couple of points of contention with some of the things you said.
Okay.
And I'm hoping, obviously, to improve your program even more than it is at the moment.
Can we get somebody to turn this speaker down a bit?
I've got to try and fit in, but I'll go on with the second one, actually. Both you and Tracy, particularly Tracy, actually, have claimed that evolution, the issue of whether we've proved or disproved evolution, has no bearing on the existence of a God. I'm afraid I can't agree with that. You might say, oh, well, that's the God of the gaps argument. Oh, yes, the actual quote from Tracy was, some religious people believe in evolution, some don't, therefore the issue is irrelevant. But the point is that if people don't believe in religion, and we don't believe in religion because we can show that evolution exists. And so if evolution was disprovable, we would think, gosh, that's a God. So for instance, if we are now, and it's not a God of the gaps argument, because cells and things, we understand how cells work, and we know a lot about the biochemistry. And if we couldn't find that the DNA mechanism existed, and we couldn't see heredity and the mutations and how that information is transferred, or for instance, if humans had a different sort of DNA to other animals, that would be a really big problem for science, and that would suggest that something very, very odd is going on.
Yes.
And that's not a God of the gaps argument, because we're familiar
Yes.
with that area.
Yes,
and so
but
something like if you found a situation where Newton's laws weren't working, you would think that's where an area which we think we understand. And so if we found that wasn't happening and we couldn't understand evolution, then that would in fact. And so when I think you yourself have said
it doesn't work backwards.
Don't get me to explain evolution or prove it. That's not irrelevant to my issue. It is, because
I apologize. We put you on hold. Hopefully you can hear me. This speaker is insanely loud.
It's very loud.
You couldn't hear us interjecting. While I agree that this would represent a problem for science, and we could certainly come to the conclusion that something strange is going on, that is not sufficient to saying that a God exists or that a God is responsible, because you're back to what the previous caller did of positing a sufficient explanation without demonstrating that it's also necessary.
I would also add that it doesn't work backwards. In other words, you could say that if it wasn't what it was, it would be weird. But you can't say that because it makes sense how it is, that has any bearing on the existence of a God. It doesn't. People can say God does it this way.
Yes, it doesn't prove a God, but when you find there's a big gap in the science where you think you understand something and it violates science, and you have a situation like that, you would think there has to be a very, very honest one. Now, it doesn't prove God, and this actually comes on to the third point that I was making, actually, that I think you've been a little bit guilty in the past of setting the bar very high for people who are ringing in who want to prove the existence of God, and you almost seem to be demanding that you're given his telephone number or something similar to that, or you want him to perform a trick repeatedly, because I think Tracy's regularly used the phrase, you want repeatable, verifiable evidence.
Yeah, same as for this thing, that's what I want.
In order to accept that anything, my standards for the evidence for God, I disagree that they're extraordinarily high. They're high in proportion to the significance of the claim, and I accept the existence of anything that we can actually demonstrate.
Right, but you can't even
what is
prove
it
your name is Matt Dillahunty. You might say you've got a birth certificate or your mother says so, but these could all be lies. You could have been secretly. You don't even know you're a real person. You don't even know you're not a replicant. The levels of proof that only maths can provide, and
The fact
Yeah,
that I
this is
could be
nuts.
wrong, I could be a replicant. My name might not be Matt Dillahunty. Actually, that one's absolutely true because when it comes to labels, I'm asserting that my name is Matt, and therefore that's the case because that's a label that we're using to identify me. Just as this, I'm calling a coffee cup. Whether or not you agree doesn't matter because it's a label I'm putting on this. But the fact that I can't disprove the claim that I'm a replicant doesn't mean that it's likely that I'm a replicant, and doesn't mean that I am not rationally justified in believing that I'm probably not a replicant.
But I'm also not asking for any further evidence than I would ask for a billion mundane things. I mean, I'll accept the evidence of existence the same as this little beanie baby. I mean, I'm not asking for something extraordinarily wild.
Right, but I mean, the thing is, you're not dealing with something. Supposedly, this God is rather secretive and rather playful. And
I don't know that. How do I know that?
Which God?
Well, supposedly, I mean, we keep on being told by the religious fanatics.
Right, but where are they getting their
He doesn't
information?
want to expose himself, or some people.
Where are they getting
so
this
it's not like an innate
information?
odd system you're trying to.
But the information
protect.
isn't coming from the God. That's what I'm saying. It's like you can't just simply you don't just start making claims about a thing and then I'm supposed to stick with your claims when I have nothing to examine to see if even your initial claims are correct. So if someone says to me, this God is secretive, my response is, how do we know? Have we looked at the God to see if it's secretive? Have we spoken to it? Have we gotten, and if we don't have a God to examine, if someone tells me this beanie baby is covered in, painful spines, right? I mean, I can look at it and say, no, that's wrong. This thing is very soft and nice. If someone tells me it's black and white and I'm not colorblind, I can look at it and say, oh, yes, it is black and white. But when someone comes at it and says, the reason I can't demonstrate my God is because he's secretive, my response is, how the hell do you know that? Did you examine your God? No, because he's secretive. Okay, well, then you don't know anything. How do you know anything about this God? How do we know what we're looking for?
Oh, well, indeed we don't. I mean, I as being an atheist, I do sympathise completely, but I think just sometimes the levels you apply are, I'd say, you couldn't pass a lot of the physics. I mean, we know that, for instance, the speed of light could potentially be different in place. There are all sorts of things that some of the levels you seem to, hurdles you seem to put on people, I think probably just so high that it was very difficult to justify almost anything.
I have to have a God to examine, or I can't even respond to a claim.
I don't understand how you can say the bar. First of all, you're an atheist, right?
Yeah.
So nobody's convinced you that a God exists. Is your standard of evidence too high?
Well, actually, I think this goes on to this goes on to my first point. Actually, I was going to one of the three was that I think you should be more proactive in disproving God rather than just saying, I'm looking for people to convince.
What am I disproving?
But we don't know. We don't know. But
God can't exist.
God, for crying out loud.
It's just the
How can we be more active in disproving something? Certainly, there are definitions of God and claims about God that can be disproven, but
how do you disprove something that's not
science
there?
is based on methodological naturalism. It can't say that the supernatural does not exist. It only holds that since we can't address that,
But
we're
I mean,
not going to
how
work
do
with
you
that.
disprove a thing that people say is impossible to examine or test or even have anything to do with?
Okay, I'll try. I mean, there are things like an all-powerful God that can create the universe and do all sorts of clever things like that. You then have a logical point. If he is all-powerful, then he can create objects that are too heavy to lift. He can create irresistible forces and immovable objects. And also, God, if he's outside time, as he must be, then presumably he knows the future, and in which case then we don't have any free will because our future is predestined.
Curiously, you seem to have a definition of God.
Yeah,
Where did you get all this information? Which God are you talking about?
Well, admittedly, I'm going for the conventional one as an example. I mean,
Conventional
the
one?
powerful one, I suppose, that presumably is cited by, I'm not familiar with the Buddhist concepts, but presumably...
The problem is that you have you have to throw out omnipotence because omnipotence is self-contradictory. So you can't have that. So there's a certain question then that the individual has to answer as to exactly what are the limits of God's power. Now, how do we determine the limits of God's power without a God to examine?
Well, I'm just trying to do it from the purposes of logic, just saying that there are logical arguments you can say about God that mean that he can't exist as an entity. It's an illogical option.
No, you can't come up with a logical argument that, well, all right, for a specifically defined God, you can certainly demonstrate that God is not logically consistent. But that's not the case for every definition of God. And actually, as we progress through civilization and the God claims keep coming up against these sort of things, the religious claims are getting better and better at obfuscating their God claims. As a matter of fact, among modern theologians, the various omnis don't represent omnis as in absolute power. They are specifically defined by modern theologians as God is maximally power, having the maximum power logically possible. So that thwarts any attempt to prove that God doesn't exist.
And then I would look at it and I would say, what is the maximum amount of power that anything could have? You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, but I mean, you
know.
laugh. You call in to say that not only are our standards just too damn high, which I find absurd, but that we should be actively disproving God's, when what we do is we ask people to define what God they're talking about and defend that and then address that.
Yeah, I don't
and
even
you
know
seem
what
to
it
think
is.
that we can logically disprove God's when, no offense, I'm as tired as anybody of saying, hey, here's what the modern theologians say. But the fact is that it's possible for somebody to believe in a God that is not absolutely all-powerful, which would be logically contradictory, but maximally powerful inside of, without a logical contradiction, that could still exist and still be the God that somebody worships. And you laugh at that.
Oh, okay, perhaps I'm saying that the all-powerful, the omnipotent, omnipresent lark is one thing you could attack. And okay, if we're going for a maximal one, then yes, okay, then obviously, in other words, people can propose a God up to the point you can logically refute it.
Well, but you know what else? There's also the problem of people who will tell you that God can make a rock so heavy he can't lift it, and then he can lift it. There are people who will present that. Now, how do you respond to that?
Because their God isn't bound by logic. Their
Yeah.
God,
They'll say logic is a construct that our God is more powerful.
Now, I agree that those people are.
I think it's absurd, but how do you reason with that
because
person?
the laws of logic are absolute. And
I agree, but they don't clearly.
I think those people are just absurd, and you can't argue. You can't argue with an idiot, I think.
I agree.
I can. I've done it for years.
But the thing is, if you're going to disprove it, and you're going to say that the God is not all-powerful, and you're going to use the logical argument, there's going to be one group of people who disagrees with you because they don't understand logic, and then there's going to be another group of people who would agree with you, but they would say, yeah, but my God is he's bound by logic, but he's all-powerful within that.
Hey, and Mark, I got 2 minutes left. I want to get to one more call before we actually close, but thanks a lot for calling.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and you're doing great stuff.
Thank you.
Get those stripy jumpers on, Tracy.
I don't know what that is. I wish I knew.
I don't either, or why we're talking about your wardrobe.
I don't know.
Adam in Westbrook, how are you? If you can be really quick, we'll try and answer this.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I was just curious. I'm an atheist, and so is my girlfriend, but she tries to convince me that it's also okay to be spiritual. She's into animism and things like astrology and stuff that we've basically, at least with astrology, have proven, aren't true. And is there any way to be somewhat spiritual but also not really believe in a God?
Yeah, there's people that say that they are that. I have yet to figure out what they mean by it. It seems that they all mean different things, and I don't really know that the word spiritual is a word that carries any really useful meaning. When the person explains what it is they're saying, that's when you have something to deal with. Did you say she believes in astrology?
Yeah, and animism.
How does she explain the different fates of twins?
She doesn't. Like, it's one of those situations where I know she just doesn't really know what she's talking about, and it sounds nice to her.
You would think twins would be, enough to really blow that right out of the water. There's twins, and they don't all have the same fate.
Yeah, they're rolling up the credits, so we got to be done. Thanks so much. Being an atheist doesn't necessarily mean you can't believe in spiritual things, which is why I'm a skeptic first and an atheist second. I'd say that skepticism leads to exclude those things. Thanks so much. Thanks to all the people who make the show happen. I won't be here next week. I've got company coming in town, but there will be folks here. And remember, coming up on the 22nd, we've got back cruise Teresa McBain, and she'll be on this show as well. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you later.